All right. Okay, friends, we are going to go ahead and rock and roll for the week. Thank you so much for joining us again. We've only got this seminar and then one more seminar the week after Thanksgiving, and then we are officially finished with the fall semester. It's crazy. Where has the time gone this year? So for those of you who are just hopping into the room right now, you have joined us for week 6, the second to last special session for our unit about a metacognitive approach to academia. And this week is specifically focused on finals week because I know that that is where really I think everyone's attention is turning at this point, and anticipating and getting ready for it. So you are going to hear from some students who have been in your shoes and are currently in your shoes about tried and true methods for surviving and thriving, of course, during finals week. So thank you so much for joining us. Today's objectives are to help you identify and apply helpful strategies for preparing for finals week, and then also to identify some campus resources that can assist you with that finals preparation. So if you've been feeling overwhelmed, aren't really sure where to start, this session should really help you out with that today. And as always, my name is Marky Rhodes. I always show this slide, not because at this point I don't think you know who I am, but because I always want to make sure that you have my email address, just in case you ever need to reach out with questions. I'm more than happy to help, as well as your mentors, so don't be afraid to email me. Just keep in mind that my email address does have that 1 at the end of it, because if you leave it off, you are emailing a different person on campus. So just keep that in mind. And I want to introduce our presenters for today. These are our student panelists who have been kind enough to join us talking all about their experiences with finals. So we have Chelsea Nguyen, who is an architecture student in her 2nd year. We have Henry White with us, who is an aerospace engineering student in the 4th year. We have Kai with us today, who is a physics student in her 3rd year. And then we have Nick, who is a biomedical engineering student in his 2nd year. So hopefully their perspectives will help you out. And we definitely have kind of a nice spread of students from across some of the colleges on campus. So we've got some nice representation to help out with everything as well. So today, friends, we are going to be focusing on these discussion questions. And panelists, keep in mind that we're only going to have about 3 minutes per question, just to kind of keep us rolling and on track for the day. So I am just going to go ahead and jump in. So the first question that I want to talk about today is, in general, what is it that students can kind of expect from finals week at Illinois Tech? So just anything that you think would be in general helpful for them to know about kind of the campus culture, things that are happening during finals week, how it's set up, anything like that, just a general what to expect. And feel free to just hop in when you're ready.
Yeah, I think with kind of the general campus culture around finals is we're definitely on a campus where there's kind of a shared appreciation for the importance of this exam week. And that tends to lead to a lot of people really kind of checking in on each other, as well as just kind of that shared understanding that, hey, maybe we're just a little bit more stressed out this week, or we've got a lot going on. So you might see different staff members around campus, just kind of giving a friendly check-in. And you'll also tend to see from the student body a lot of students with that shared understanding where they're ready to kind of push off like ancillary responsibilities and just say, hey, I was going to ask you about this. I'm going to wait till after finals week so we can all take the time to study. So really, I think there's kind of a common understanding of where students are. So people kind of get what's going on with each other.
That is excellent to know. I think that shared supportive culture is huge whenever you feel like you have 8 million things to do. Any other thoughts on this question, mentors, before we move on?
Yeah, on that note, I think it's, this semester's a little different, but usually we have the midnight breakfast, the Commons that's open. The library's open 24/7 all finals week. We have a lot of student orgs just giving out hot chocolate, giving out snacks, giving out coffee in the library or candy. We have a lot of study sessions. A lot of professional orgs will be running study sessions with, third and fourth years that can help you out on understanding the topics. So there's definitely a lot of resources, a lot of snacks, a lot of coffee.
And what else do you need in life other than midnight breakfast and snacks and coffee to get you through finals week? So definitely take advantage of that, friends. That's all there to support you and just take some of the stress off. Anything else, friends, before we move on? All right. So next question, super important. When should students start studying for finals, and why do you feel that way?
Um, I would definitely say you should start studying now if you haven't already. You always want to get a jump start on it. So I know finals week seems kind of far away. I'm still thinking of it as far away. You know, I still have Thanksgiving break and everything like that. But you really want to give yourself some time to pace yourself. So you don't want to be cramming the night before and pulling an all-nighter where you're going to forget everything. You really want to prepare yourself. So if you get stuck on something, you can reach out to the professor. Just more time is always going to be better for yourself.
Awesome. Any other thoughts, friends?
Yeah, and to add to that, the week goes by really fast. So don't expect to study for your finals, like all your finals that week, like study beforehand and make sure you try to finish like your projects and your papers like beforehand because you're not going to have a lot of time to like do them that week. So if you start studying now, then you'll have more time to like do other things during finals week.
That's a really good thought, Chelsea. And fun fact, friends, the old elementary school teacher in me, there's a ton of research about affect, which is kind of your general emotional state, showing that when it is lower, you actually tend to comprehend and learn better. So by starting earlier and avoiding kind of that stress of waiting until the last minute, your brain is actually going to comprehend the information a lot better as well. So definitely do yourself that favor and start studying if you haven't already. I mean, we're all stuck at home anyway, so why not, right? All right, number 3, friends, preparing for multiple finals at one time can be incredibly overwhelming, especially I think for first year students when it's their first finals that they're facing. So what organizational tips and tricks can you provide to help first year students manage their time?
I think something that's definitely was a common pitfall for me my first year and a half, even 2 years of college, is I would frequently make the mistake of just studying for the final that came first and not studying for the next final until after the first one passed. And that's definitely something to avoid and actually put enough time for all finals ahead of time. But to keep track of it, what I've found is helpful to do is kind of do just an internal audit before you start hitting that major finals studying period. So this might be a good week to do that. Kind of go over your courses and do a little sense check with yourself of, okay, how comfortable do I feel with this course material? Are there any huge holes I'm missing from the stuff listed on the syllabus where it's like, oh, I really don't remember this section at all. I'll look at homework grades in different classes to see which subject areas might take a little bit more time to relearn. And after doing this kind of internal audit, that gives you a better sense of maybe how much time to devote to studying for each class, because chances are there will be some classes where you might only need to study 3 hours for in the week before finals, and other classes where you might want to put in 7 or 8 hours of studying. So just taking the time before you get too deep into this next week to do an internal audit and just see, hey, where do I feel on these classes can really help put things in perspective as well and make it feel less overwhelming, especially if you write these things out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What I do is I kind of have 2 tips for myself. First, I try to triage my classes. So you all probably have a class that you're doing really well in, or hopefully you have, a solid grade. The final probably won't change it unless you do amazing or horribly. So maybe you can justify just doing a few quick reviews in that class. But you might have another class that you're right at an 89.5, and you've always been struggling in that class. You should triage that class and say, I need to spend a lot more time in that class as opposed to the other classes where I'm doing really well. And secondly, what I always try to do is to not let myself get all overwhelmed. So it's very overwhelming having 5 classes in front of you, 5 notebooks saying, I need to know all of this. Give yourself a day and say, today is calculus day, and study calculus that day. Then the next day say, this is chemistry day. And that way I find it doesn't really seem as overwhelming because you can say, today I just need to learn calculus.
Those are awesome thoughts. So giving yourself permission to prioritize is huge. I think a lot of students feel like they have to put in equal time for every single final, and that's just not realistic. In the real world, when we graduate from college, we have to prioritize all the time and decide, okay, I need to triage this specific thing first. So that's a really good thought, Nick. And then Henry, that self-awareness of yourself as a learner is huge in determining, how much you need to do, how much you need to study, what those strategies are going to look like. Any other thoughts about this, mentors, before we move on?
Yeah, I was gonna add, now's a great time to sit down, look at your syllabus, highlight the things that you're like, oh, I don't even know when we covered this, or I have a vague idea and I remember that it was really hard on the test, and schedule office hours with your professor. If you want to do that, now's the time, because usually a lot of students will try and schedule them the day before or 2 days before the final, and then they can't really fit you in. Professors are busy and they won't give you that one-on-one quality time. So if you really want to use that resource, now's the time.
Absolutely. Get there before the rush begins and the last minute panic. Any other thoughts, friends?
Yeah, I just have one more thing. I was just going to state the obvious, but people don't think about this a lot.
Mhm.
Just write things down and like make sure you use Google Calendar just to like have your whole like schedule organized. Like make sure you look at the final schedule so you know when your finals are, because I find some of my friends didn't even know when their finals were. So make sure you check when they are. And when you are blocking out times to like study, make sure it's not like really long periods where it's like ineffective anymore. Make sure they're like short, and like make sure that like you limit your distractions so it's like the most effective like study time you can have, so you can save time.
Absolutely. I mean, friends, that was probably my, my golden arrow whenever I was in college, was that ability to backwards plan. So I am going to share the final exam schedule with everybody at the end of this. So if you don't know when they are yet, you will by the end of this seminar. And what you want to do is you want to look at those dates. You want to compare that to the syllabus, the content, or whatever study guide you've been given, and then give yourself benchmarks on your calendar. Tell yourself by a certain date, I want to have mastered X, Y, and Z concepts in this class. By this date, I want to have mastered this in this class. And with that backwards planning, then you have a solid plan of action. And instead of just kind of feeling overwhelmed and like, oh, I have so much to do, you actually have items and a solid plan that you can kind of tick off as you go. Sometimes just putting it on paper or putting it on a calendar is just that first step that helps you to feel less overwhelmed and allows you to actually get started and start taking action. The next one is huge, and I understand that this is going to be very different depending on who you are as a learner and who you are as a student. So there has to be some metacognition in this, some self-awareness of thinking about your own thinking. But mentors, for you, what study strategies tend to work the best? And do you think any of these are maybe connected to your specific major as well, if you want to talk about that?
I'm going to talk specifically for very like sciencey majors or most of STEM. Practice problems, practice problems, practice problems, do them again. And then if your professor gives out a practice final or any practice midterms, do those. Usually like questions are really, really similar, like same thing with different numbers. So use that to your advantage. Really study practice problems and the practice finals.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, definitely second that, especially for science-based majors and engineering-based majors. Two other things that I find really helpful, and it may be a little bit more difficult this year given social distancing, but one is studying outside my dorm room. There's just too many distractions in my dorm room. My bed's a foot away. That's too tempting to lay down on the bed with a phone, check social media instead of getting into studying. So maybe using the lounges of the buildings if you're on campus, or spaces like libraries, spaces in MTCC. So changing the environment to just kind of get into that mindset. And then the other thing is touching base with a friend in that class, going over some of the material together. If one of the things might be helping to just talk through the material together, can help make it a little bit easier. Working through problems together can help illuminate different problem solving processes for the questions. But one of the most important things is that oftentimes I found in studying, there is material that I don't know, but I didn't even realize might be asked on the exam. There's stuff I didn't know that I didn't know. And what studying with a friend might do is help reduce those blind spots. So when you're going through the material, they might bring up, hey, can we go through this question or these questions from chapter 5? And it's like, oh, I didn't even realize that was going to be on the exam, or I didn't even realize I don't remember how to do that stuff. So find a friend to study with, and it doesn't have to be for every study session, but for each class, maybe touch base with one other person in that class before you get to the final to just kind of evaluate your blind spots.
Awesome. Other thoughts, pieces of advice?
Yeah, I actually want to agree with Henry, like changing up your situation, like study situation. Like all of us are like usually in our rooms and we eat, sleep, and do our work here. And my theory is that you cannot do all that like in the same room because you're just mixing all these functions. So switching up your like area where you study will like refresh your mind and like give you a new mindset to like study better. And I'm an architecture major, so I have more presentations, but I still do have tests. So for my test, I like making study guides. If you make your own study guides, like what you need to know, like I find that's really helpful. Or like asking your friends if they've made study guides, see like, and like switch it up because they might have gotten something that you missed too. So.
I know I personally always made my own study guides, even if my friends had some, just because the act of putting it together and having to search for the information and write down the answers, I mean, that alone is already starting the process of studying, and then you can compare with your friends. Great advice. Anything else, friends, before we pop forward? All right, thank you so much. So the next one, kind of piggybacking off of that, is do you have any test-taking strategies that work well for you? And once again, this is probably going to be kind of connected to the major because the tests are going to look very different depending on what you're doing. So feel free to jump in.
I think it's, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's something that you all have probably heard before with test taking is don't necessarily do the questions in order. If you get a more difficult question, maybe move on to one of the easier ones. But I found sometimes during finals, especially if it's a longer exam, if it's a 2-hour exam, it can be really difficult to keep track of, hey, what did I actually skip over? What do I need to go back review? Or did I get an answer on a question, but I still want to go back and review it? So on my tests, I will use the leftmost margin of the test. And for questions that I either skipped over or I got an answer, but I definitely want to review and like check my work on, I'll put an asterisk in that left-hand margin next to the number that I need to go back on, or like come up with a different notation. I was like, okay, I really need to go back and check this one before submitting, or I got an answer, I feel pretty good about it, but maybe a little review, use a different symbol for that, just because you might not have time to go back and check every single answer at the end of the exam, depending on things. In addition to that, even bringing us a second piece of paper to the exam, and which is, I think, pretty easy because since most of them will be virtual, and writing out on that second piece of paper, go back to question 1A, go back to question 3F, and just having some way to neatly organize, because when you get down to kind of crunch time and there's only 5 minutes left and that's all you have left to review answers, you might not get to go back to every question, but knowing where you can find the ones that needs the most double checking is helpful.
Other thoughts?
Yeah. So my professors hate me for doing this, but I always unstaple my exams and don't do them in order. It's a very me thing, but I find it super helpful to just reduce that like stress of, oh, question 1 through 18, gotta go one by one. If I don't know, I get stuck. So I just unstaple the exam, I spread it out, and I kind of flip through, and I'm like, oh, I know this problem, I've seen it before, and I just do it on the spot. And I just flip through, find what I know, circle the ones that I'm like, I have no idea, I need to sit down and really think about them. And then I try to organize my time, so I do the ones I know first, and then I do the really hard ones that I need to think about, and then by the end I can do the ones that are like maybe a little more time consuming, just so I don't run out of time.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts?
For me, I get very like obsessed with my amount of time left, and so I would like say there's 30 questions and I have an hour on the exam, so that's 2 minutes per question, and I would consistently like every 30 seconds check the time. And I think what I would really recommend is, if you're like that, do what Henry said and don't be afraid to skip questions, do what you know, and then just be kind of mentally aware in the back of your head what the time is. But if you skip the hard questions, you don't really need to worry about time as much, because you're not wasting all your time on a really hard question. You're really getting your maximum points. And that way you can spend more time worrying, you can spend less time worrying about your time left and more time actually completing questions on the exam, which should help you.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll keep mine short. I just want to say, like, make sure you get sleep the night before, and make sure you write down like all your work. Don't try to do in your head. You might get partial credit, which will help your case. And then finally, like, make sure you read the instructions very thoroughly, because they might trick you in there and you might forget something, which will like cause you to lose points. So just make sure you read it at least twice, so you know what the question is asking you.
Oh my gosh, Chelsea, thank you so much for saying that. I remember when I taught and I would have a multiple part question and the students would answer like the first two parts, but not the last. And I'm like, I know you know this, but I can't give you credit if you don't answer the question. So yeah, reading directions, friends, you're in college. You need to do that. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward to, and I feel like this will be pretty quick since we already kind of tied it into our other questions, but do you have any major or college specific advice for finals preparation? You know, like architecture tends to be this way, so keep this in mind. So just feel free to jump in when you're ready.
Yes, I'll start. So with architecture, you have more of presentations. So just make sure that you prepare your presentation before and you write it out and you rehearse it either to yourself or to someone else so that they can hear it and see what could be potentially wrong with it. And a lot of the times the reviewer will ask you a ton of questions and it might be hard to prepare for that because you don't know what they're going to ask. So just make sure when you're like designing your project that you think it through and just make sure that you have a reason why you design for like a certain way so that when you're up there, like don't try to say like, oh, I don't know, I just did it because it looked cool. They will not like that. Just make sure that you're confident and you know why you designed the way you did.
Other thoughts?
I think we've talked pretty thoroughly about kind of engineering and science-based courses, but I think for the case, if you're an engineering or science major and you've got like 4 tests, but then 1 presentation, it'll be really easy to think, oh, I'll just focus on the tests. And as long as I fill out my slides for the presentation, it'll go good. Try to get out of that mindset. At least practice your presentation once or twice, actually talk it through. If you're in the position where you have just 1 presentation finals week, don't let it be something that falls to the back burner. Be sure you give that ample time as well.
Other thoughts, friends? All right, and I agree. I think we talked a lot about engineering and science. So number 7, have you consulted any campus resources, such as the Academic Resource Center, to assist you with preparing for finals? What was your experience? And then are there any other resources that you would recommend?
So I've gone to the ARC a handful of times, and they've always been very helpful, very friendly. Since we're a small student body with, a limited number of professors, oftentimes they'll know your professor and they'll say, oh, they really like to see this, or they really want to see that in your partial credit. So not only will they help you learn the content, but they'll help you kind of boost your grade by showing what that professor wants. But what I'd really recommend you all do is take advantage of your SIs or supplemental instructors. I never went to any of my SI meetings last year until I went to the very last one before finals. And I didn't know they did this, but for my chemistry, the professor gave them last year's exam and the answer key to last year's exam, which is basically the exact same test, just with different numbers. So I knew exactly what type of questions I was going to be tested on. And that absolutely kind of saved my butt that final exam year, because I knew exactly what type of questions to prepare for. So definitely take advantage of your SIs.
That's huge. Thank you, Nick. Any other thoughts about resources to consult?
I'd say if you're planning on using the ARC, try to shoot for the week before finals rather than in finals week. ARC will be open during finals week, but if you're looking to get kind of a lot of review, start that review session in the week before finals, and then you can actually, depending on which tutor you see and what their scheduling is, you might be able to get multiple sessions with them leading up to the finals, starting that week before and then head into finals week. When I tutor at the ARC, that is probably what I think are the best tutoring sessions are the ones when people come back and follow up and don't come in with just like one homework problem. It's like, oh, I just want to solve this one review problem for the exam. They come in with the exam sheet or the study guide or whatever the professor provided them, and they say, I've done most of these, but can I talk through those? And we do it in a couple of sessions. And I think that tends to be the best learning experience as well. So definitely just think of the ARC as another tool to add to your toolkit in studying and preparing for finals, and not as like a last resort panic mode. I'm going to go here when everything else fails.
Excellent. Any other thoughts about resources to consult? All right. So the last question is, what do you do to manage stress during the weeks leading up to and during finals week?
So I'll take that one. Personally, I think it's very important that you take some time to just take your mind off of schoolwork. I know a lot of people will like, if you're like me, you'll be like walking around getting lunch and you'll still be thinking like, oh, that last chapter I reviewed. So doing something that just forces you to take your mind off of it. For me, it's working out. Just, I can't think when I'm working out. I have other things to worry about. So it's just a nice relaxed time for me to do something away from studying and focusing on all that. And also getting some sleep. I know some people might be tempted, especially with like really hard classes, to just pull an all-nighter and study as much as they can. But honestly, if you don't know it, but by 2 a.m., you don't know it. It's fine. Go to bed, get some rest. Make sure you get a good breakfast before. That's my advice.
Great. Other thoughts about managing stress?
Finals week can definitely be a little bit of an ordeal, and it is kind of a big milestone, especially your first finals week in college. But recognizing that also, I think, calls for rewarding yourself afterwards. If you can come up with some really cool thing to do, like after your last final ends, that you can look forward to as the week goes on, I found that really helpful in past years. That's been my friends and I might say, hey, we're going to go downtown, check out the lights in Millennium Park after all our finals wrap up. And while that might not be as advisable this year, there's definitely other things you can do. Personally, my reward for completing finals week this year is I'm queuing up an order with one of my favorite bakeries in Chicago to have it delivered right after, like an hour after my last final ends on Thursday. And that just gives me something to look forward to throughout the week. And it's a way to kind of celebrate the effort you've been putting in. So something like that can really help instill a little bit more positivity into your finals week, and don't let that stress become as dominating.
Yeah, Henry, treat yourself. Absolutely. Great advice. And I'm going to need to know what bakery that is because I always have to add those to my list. Other thoughts about managing stress, mentors?
I definitely would say it's important to not be afraid to take breaks. I know it feels a little lazy or selfish to take a break when you're spending a lot of time studying because you're like, oh, I need to get a good grade. How can I not study? But oftentimes I find that it makes myself more efficient. Just as an example, I was working on a MATLAB assignment. It wasn't working. I was spending hours. I was just being angry, frustrated. I went to bed, woke up, and I solved it in like 20 or 30 minutes. So definitely give yourself some breathing room, give yourself a break. You'll oftentimes find that when you come back to it, you'll be less upset, less stressed, and you'll actually be more efficient while studying.
Wonderful. Final thoughts? All right. Mentors, thank you so much for your input on these questions. For the sake of time, I am going to go ahead and introduce some resources to you that if you are not already aware of, you definitely want to become aware of. So obviously, if you are looking for some guidance in preparing for finals, of course, take advantage of your supplemental instructors, as Nick mentioned. That sounds like a huge resource. But another resource, of course, always is the ARC, the Academic Resource Center. So tutors are available during finals week, the 7th through the 12th, and they do have extended hours, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. They're doing walk-in tutoring that week, but as Henry and the other mentors pointed out, don't wait until the week of finals to do this. In fact, the really good review sessions are typically happening that week right after Thanksgiving, the week prior to finals week. So definitely get in. The ARC schedule can be found here. I will make sure to drop these links in the chat here at the very end. And then also the final exam schedule. So I am going to go ahead and pull up the chat and drop these for you so that if you are not already aware, you will be now. So here is the ARC tutoring schedule. You can sign up for some virtual appointments that way. And then for the final exam schedule, if you haven't seen it yet, here it is. So those should be the links that you need to do what you need to do. And so, as I said, you know, they do have those extended hours during finals week, but that being said, don't wait until finals week. Start visiting the ARC, you know, next week after Thanksgiving if you can. And remember that they do have virtual tutoring sessions. So if you are a student who's going to go home and then stay home after Thanksgiving and finish the semester remotely, you can still take advantage of the ARC. So make sure that you're not losing out on those resources. Let's go ahead and very quickly talk about some closing announcements. We talked about the importance of taking breaks, right? And what that does for your brain and helping you to comprehend. So we actually have a first year experience movie night that's going to be virtual happening on Friday, December 4th. If you just need an excuse to sit down, stare at the TV, you know, not really think about anything, but maybe have some opportunity for some fun interaction with some other first years, this is the time to do it. So you'll all be auto-registered for this and you'll get an email and a text message reminder. But if you happen to be free on Friday, December 4th, and you just want a little bit of time to take a break, this is a good way to do that. In addition, to get you thinking about finals, if you haven't already, this is your reflection journal prompt. And so even if you are not typically someone who does reflection journals, this may be one that you want to take advantage of because it's going to help you to do the things that we've already been suggesting during this seminar. So your reflection journal prompt this time is to actually create an action plan for yourself for preparing for finals week that actually has specific learning goals and dates that you need to master those by, and building in time for self-care into that plan, because we know that that is super important. And it does not have to necessarily be in written form. If you'd like to do this on your calendar and take screenshots, whatever you want to do, whatever is helpful is completely fine. And feel free to send it to your first year mentor to get some feedback if you think that that would be helpful. And friends, join us next time. Our very last seminar of the fall semester is going to be on December 1st from 12:50 to 1:20. And our final first year seminar for the fall semester is going to cover the rest of those major need to know topics when it comes to promoting academic success. So we're going to talk about academic honesty and the importance of that at the university level. This is a huge conversation with very real implications, so you're going to want to hear that. We're going to talk about how to successfully build relationships with faculty to promote your own success in the classroom, and then also various methods of advocating for yourself as a student as well. So definitely don't miss it. This is the last one of the fall semester, and then after the winter break, we'll be right back during spring semester for our first year seminars as usual on Tuesdays. And then friends, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, as always, feel free to email me. My email address is right there. I am always more than happy to help. So thank you so much. Best of luck to you. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Be safe during this holiday season. And we will see you after Thanksgiving for our last first year seminar. Have a great day, everybody.
You. Bye.
Bye.
See you next week.